The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style.
Well, Hank, second time we're meeting with you, and you wanted to start a little bit about your grocery store workings. So go ahead, tell me a little bit about that.
I appreciate your being here, Mike. And let me start by saying at the age of 14 through 17, I worked in a grocery store after school, 3 hours a night or afternoon, and all day Saturday. It was a total of 24 hours, and I received pay of all of $3.60 for those 24 hours. And when I got home with that money, I had to turn $2 over to my parents to help purchase groceries and that. After completing my junior year of high school, I was 17 years old, and I had a relative that came to the house. He was offering me a job where he worked. The company had an opening for a person to work in summer only, and he thought of me, and I accepted the job. They would pay me 50 cents an hour for a 40-hour week, so earning $20 a week. And I continued working all summer, but when it came time to resume going back to high school for my senior year, I was given the opportunity to either go to school or stay working. And because my family needed the extra money, I quit high school and continued working at this company. And I worked alongside of this relative for a number of months, and then after the war broke out in 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and we entered the war. It was a few months after that this relative quit the job. He went to work at Kodak. He had a health condition, and he was not able to serve in the service, so he wanted a better position. And after he left, I was given full responsibility to take over the job that I was trained for. And I kept working at that job until January 1943, when I was drafted for the service. And that was January 1943. And for the next 8 months, I went through basic training, radio operator school, and training to fire a 50 caliber machine gun. I was assigned to be a radio operator gunner on a bomber, and that training concluded in September of 1943. And during September, I went to Salt Lake City and met 9 other fellows, and I became associated with those 9 men, where we then were considered a bomber crew, a 10-man bomber crew. And it consisted of 4 officers, a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and bombardier, and 6 gunners. And we started training on October 1st for a period of 6 months. We spent 3 months in Colorado and 3 months in Massachusetts. We finished our training in around the end of March of 1944. So in early April, we picked up a brand new B-24 bomber and flew down to Florida, not knowing exactly where we were headed, but once we got down there, it was a known fact that we would end up over in Italy, of joining the 15th Air Force. We went from Florida to Brazil, landed there in 2 places, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, landed in Africa at 2 different airports, and finally landed at our base in Manduria, Italy, which is down in the boot of southeast of Italy. That's where most of the 15th Air Force bases were located. We arrived there on April 15th, and the day we arrived, they announced to our crew that they would have to break us up and reassign us to other crews that had vacancies. So we never got to fly together the way we trained. We didn't like the decision, but we had no choice. And the only consolation was that we felt, well, that gave us a better chance that some of us would be able to complete the required number of missions, which happened to be 50. If you got through successfully all 50 missions, you were considered worn out, and they sent you back to the United States for reassignment. But during that period, from April 17th to September 4th, that's when I flew my last mission. During that period, there were 4 members of our original crew that fell on bad times. 2 of the crewmen, a gunner and our navigator, the crews they were flying on a mission, the plane was damaged so badly they had to bail out, and they became prisoners of war of the Germans until the Germans surrendered. And then there was one, our ball turret gunner. He was on a crew that the plane was so badly damaged that the pilot lost complete control, and the plane went out in a spiral right down to the earth and crashed. All 10 men were killed immediately. The 4th was our original tail gunner. Then the plane he flew on was attacked by German fighters, and somehow he received wounds to his stomach, either by bullets or shrapnel or something, but they made it safely back to the base. And when they landed, they had an ambulance ready for him. They took him to another town where there was a hospital to treat him. They patched him up, and eventually they sent him back to the States, and his flying days were over. And I was told that he was actually discharged from the service. He was no longer able to serve. And that was it. So there were 6 of us that were able to complete 50 missions. And it was about the end of September, early October, before they found transportation to take us from Italy back to the U.S. It was a troop carrying boat that took maybe 10 days to cross the Atlantic. And when we arrived in the U.S., I was able to get a 30-day furlough. And after the furlough, I had to report back to a base in Atlantic City for a few days. From Atlantic City, they sent me to Reno, Nevada, which was a base for the what they call the Air Transport Command. At that base, where they trained pilots to operate a C-46 cargo plane, and it was also a training base for radio operators. These cargo planes were sent over to Asia, and I don't know the country where they took off from, but at this base in Asia, they flew over a mountain range, landed in China. This country was supplying China with a lot of war material. The Chinese, they had all their seaports were bottled up because the Japanese occupied the coastline of China, so they could not get any war supplies from other sources. They could make ammunition and stuff inland from there, but not enough. Our country was good enough to supply with extra war material. And while I was at that base, I was lucky enough. I was there for a refresher course, and they decided to send all their instructors overseas, and they were looking for replacement instructors. Well, I raised my hand, and I was accepted to be a trainee, an instructor. When the radio operators were ready to take some week of flying, I was able to instruct these students on flights for about a week. And I was in that position till the Japanese surrendered, and I was then had to wait about 2 months after that before I was discharged. That was occurred in October 1945. And I was only home a few days, and my dad asked me what I wanted to do. I said, well, I need a new job. And he said, well, with your radio experience, maybe he could help me. He was working at a factory where they made radios, and he knew the superintendent in charge of that department. And he mentioned that I was looking for a job, and the superintendent said, send him in, I'll put him to work. And so I did start working in late October at that company. And with the winter months and that, I was only interested in kind of picking up, resuming my civilian life. There wasn't much going on during the winter months. And I did, my object was to learn how to drive. I never had a driver's license, so on weekends, my oldest brother took me out for driving lessons. And anyway, about early April of 1946, I had a sister-in-law that came to me. She says, Hank, You don't have a girlfriend. She said, I have a niece that's about 2 or 3 years younger than you, and I'd like you to meet her if it's okay with you. Well, I said, yes, I'd be open to having a date with her. And so she did arrange a blind date uh, for the to meet this niece of hers. Well, she and my brother and this girl, they met me downtown Rochester. We went to a movie and had something to eat after the movie, and we had no. My brother didn't have a car. I didn't have a car, so we had to depend on bus transportation. And I decided I better go along with them. They lived down in the Charlotte area of the city, and the girl I met was in the town of Greece. And it occurred to me that if she got off the bus, she would have to walk home alone. And that was about 10, 12 minutes walk from the bus stop alone to get home. And that didn't appeal to me. So I rode along. I got off the bus with her, walked her home. And I couldn't stay very long because buses began to get out of service around midnight, and I had to get back and board a bus to get my home. But after that, when I left her that night, I told her I was interested in her. I would like another date with her, and she accepted. And I told her I was learning to drive, and then as soon as I get my license, I was ready to buy a used car, and we could then, date. We wouldn't have to depend on bus service. So I did that for a couple of weeks, and I did finally pass my driver's test, bought a car, and we started going out on Saturday nights. And eventually she introduced me to another girlfriend who had a boyfriend, and this couple, we went out, the four of us. And after that, she asked this couple what their opinion was of me, and they gave her a good report. So as a result, she was wanting to, go out with me a little more often. But during that period, I found out that she was also dating another younger fellow that had a car. And she would see this fellow either on Friday night or a Sunday. And about that time, I had worked up enough interest in her that I decided I would like to continue going with her, but on a steady basis. And I didn't approve of her going out with this other fellow. So I gave her a choice. I said, you either go steady with me or give up on me if you want to continue with the other fella. And if you want to go steady with me, you have to stop seeing this other fella. Well, she eventually had one more date with him, and then she announced to him that she would not see him anymore. With that announcement, the boy fainted in their driveway. She had to call on her father to come and help her revive the fella. And anyway, as a result of that, she never did see the fella again. So I continued to date her more often. And the more often I saw her, she introduced me to more and more of her friends, and they all took a liking to me. I was brought up in a different neighborhood than where she was, and she had all kinds of friends, and all of the people I knew, they were scattered. I didn't see any of them when I returned from the service. So It was in October 1946 that I finally gave her an engagement ring, and she was in no hurry to get married. She was only 19, and I was 21 at the time. And she wanted to have a June wedding, so I went along with that, and we kept dating all winter long. And actually, in September, since I was in with her so solid, her parents were in a bowling league, and that's for couples, and they bowled on Friday night starting close to 9 o'clock. It would last almost 2 hours, and they needed another couple, so they wanted their daughter and me to join them, and which we did. And so the four of us were together every Friday night bowling. And when it was over with, about 11 o'clock, I was able to go to a bake shop up in the city. A fellow I worked with at Stromberg Carlson worked on a Friday evening at a relative's bake shop, and I was able to go to that bakery and buy a freshly made kuchen. I'd bring it back, and we would sit around the table and have coffee and kuchen. And of course, her parents would go to bed about midnight, and I would hang around for about another hour. And anyway, we finally did get married on the 28th of June, 1947. And it was about a month, maybe a month and a half after we got married. The personnel office where I worked came to me and said they had an opening in the engineering department. And they was wondering if I would be interested. They had a deal where there was a technician working there, and he wanted to go to school at RIT. They had a program where for 3 years you attend RIT, where you work 10 weeks, go to school 10 weeks, and keep alternating for the 3-year period. There was no school in the summertime, but this fella had signed up for that course, and they wanted to have an alternate to fill in when he was at school. They wanted another technician to be working to replace him, and that's what they offered me. And they said since I was in the service, my tuition and would be paid for by the government under the GI Bill, and they would also pay me subsistence during that time. And it started out in September. This fellow went to RIT for 10 weeks, and I started working in the engineering department in September for 10 weeks. And after 10 weeks, then I went to RIT, and he then resumed working in the engineering department while I was away. And that continued for 3 years. Now, my wife, she was working at Kodak all that time, and I was making enough money of working for the weeks that I did work and for the money the government paid me. So every penny my wife earned, we were able to save. After I graduated in June of May of 1950, we decided it was time to. We had enough money we could go out and we purchased a lot out in Webster and started having a house built. And we were able to move into that house in 1941. And I'm sorry, 1951. Yeah, 1951. And my wife, she continued to work for about a year, but then it was time to, start a family. So in March of 1953, she gave birth to a daughter of ours by the name of Diane. And then 2 years later, she gave birth to our son, Robert, in February 1955. And after that, the house was all paid for. She was not working. She stayed at home to take care of the kids. And after a couple of years, at the place where I worked, my boss, he had left there. He took a job out in San Diego, California. And when he left, he was like a father figure to me. And he said if I ever wanted a job out in California, he would arrange that for me. So in 1957, I got the urge to leave the company I worked for, and he offered me a job out there, paid all my expenses to move out there, gave me a nice increase in salary. And when we arrived out there, went out there in April of 1957. Well, when we got out there was a big disappointment. He was able to line up a house for us as a brand new house, but it was on a small lot. It wasn't nearly as nice a house as we left. And it was at a place where near a Navy air base, and there were aircraft taking off all day long with their afterburners. And anyway, I did start working in late April, and my wife, she was at home with the two children, and fortunately, there was the neighbor 2 doors from us. The fellow was a Navy officer, and he had a wife, and they had a child, 4 years old, a daughter. And so my daughter and this daughter, this woman's the child, played together every day. That was the only salvation. And the two of them realized that my wife was not happy about the situation, and they did everything possible to help her out on a daily basis, to put up with all the noise. And she was so down in the dumps all summer long. I could tell she was not satisfied. She didn't approve of the move in the first place. And finally, it was about September, maybe October. She said, "Hank, I have to tell you, we have to get back to East." She didn't like the fact that we were bringing up our children without the benefit of them seeing their grandparents. And she was homesick, and fortunately I didn't burn my bridges when I left that company, and I was able to go back to work at, it was then called General Dynamics. General Dynamics had bought out Stromberg Carlson, and so I was able to resume working at the General Dynamics from December 1957 until December of 1970. At that time, much of the business we had, we were busy for many, many years, but eventually the business disappeared, and And we had a general manager that was in charge of a San Diego operation as well as the Rochester operation. And he was not about to move to Rochester, so the work that was still available in Rochester, they moved all of that out to the San Diego plant and closed the facility in Rochester. And I was put out of work on December of 1970. So when New Year's came around, I naturally had to get out, beat the bushes, looking for work locally. And I did that for 4 months steady. I went to every major firm in the city of Rochester, and with my experience, there was no company that could offer me a position. So about the first part of May, I told my wife, I'm just going to have to resort to looking for work out of town. So I went to the main library, picked up out of town papers, and one day I was looking at a Buffalo, New York paper, and I saw an ad where they were looking for this little company in Indiana was wanting to hire an engineer. Well, I'm not an engineer, but for some reason I said, I didn't know anything about this company, but I decided I'd write them a letter, send them my resume, and see what would happen. Well, my letter arrived at the personnel office at this place in Huntington, Indiana, and they gave their letter to the chief engineer. Well, this chief engineer had just been moved from Texas up to Indiana. There was a firm in Texas that was a large electronic firm. They had just purchased this company in Indiana, and they were replacing personnel with their own staff. Well, this chief engineer happened to be a person I worked for at General Dynamics, looking after expenditures on contracts that he was responsible for. So my experience at that time was working with figures and that. And when he saw my letter, he gave me a phone call. It was right on my birthday, May 16, 1971. And he called me. He says, Hank, I only have about 4 engineers and a couple of technicians, and this company is a small company, and I'm unable to offer you a job. But he said there's an opening in the contracts department, and I've turned your resume over to the manager, and he's very interested in talking with you. He says you can expect to receive a call to come out for an interview. Well, the day after, I did get the call. I was invited for an interview, and for some reason, I took my wife and we drove out from Rochester to Indiana. And the day of the interview, when I met this manager, he asked me, he says, where did you live in Rochester? Well, I told him, well, I actually live in Penfield. Well, his eyes open wide. He says, would you believe I lived in Penfield myself? He says, I used to work at the Xerox company in Webster, but we lived in Penfield. And from then on, the interview centered more about talking about Penfield than what the job was all about. But eventually he said the position I'm looking to fill is one that would require putting bids together, gathering information to supply the prices of spare parts that the company was selling, and plus pulling together cost estimates on major contracts that the company was interested in obtaining from the government. And with my experience at General Dynamics, it was no problem. I had enough experience to fill that position, and as a result, I got an offer and I accepted and started working there until on June 1st of 1971. And unfortunately, when I went to work there, well, my wife and I, we decided that she would stay back in Penfield until the house was sold, and I would go to Huntington, Indiana, and find a rooming house. And I did find a place where I could have a bedroom, and I lived in that house with the bedroom for one whole year before our house sold in Penfield. My wife, she was back there with our son, who was still attending Penfield High School. And anyway, in June of 1972, she had sold the house on her own, and we were able to move the family from Penfield we bought a house in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was about 22 miles from where I worked. And it was an easy way to get back and forth to work. And anyway, I continued to work there and live in Fort Wayne. And eventually, my son, he had to finish the senior year of high school at a new school in close to where we lived in Indiana. He didn't appreciate that, but as a result, he was able to go to college at Purdue. And anyway, I continued to work at the company until 1980. They decided to relocate their operation, leave Indiana, and move the entire operation to Florida. In order to win more contracts, they needed to have cheaper labor, so they pulled up stakes and sent a good number of people down to Florida, and I was included in the transfer. So I was sent down to Florida in 1980. And my wife, she had picked up a job working at a mutual fund place for a couple years, but after that, when I was transferred to Florida, she continued working for a couple months, and then eventually she came down to Florida to join me. And well, after I got down there, I signed a contract to have a new house built, and that worked out real good because the area I moved into, I was working in an office in Tampa, and just west of Tampa, there were areas close to the Gulf of Mexico, a place called Palm Harbor. Never heard of it before, but I had my oldest brother. He had retired, and he retired to Florida, and he lived in a town called Dunedin, which is right adjacent to Palm Harbor. So I bought this house in Palm Harbor, only a few miles away from my oldest brother, and both my brother and his wife are very happy that we were in that neighborhood where we could get together quite often. Anyway, I kept working until 1988. In 1988, I retired. The company actually, a couple of years before that, the government had canceled their contract. They said the quality of the radios they were building down in Florida was not the same as when they were built up in Indiana, and they canceled the contract. And with that announcement, corporate headquarters decided to close down our division. But I was laid off. I was not quite age 62 when that happened. I was only a few months away from my birthday of 62, and just before I had made arrangements to start collecting Social Security. I was able to collect a pension, but just before I reached the age of 62, they called me back to work part-time because they were filing a suit against the government. And from my past experience, they said they could use my help. And so I did continue to keep working until 1988. But after that, I retired, and then my wife and I, we started taking foreign trips over to Europe. So between 1988 and the year 2000, we made 4 trips over to Europe. The very first trip, our daughter and her husband, he was in the Air Force, and he was based over in Germany, and we spent that first trip with them, and they were able to take us all around the different countries. They had many tours. We went to Paris, Switzerland, and Austria, Holland, Belgium, as on the first trip. And we liked the foreign trip so much, we decided to continue. And eventually we went to places like Norway, Sweden, Italy, and that was it. Now, in between 1988 and 2000, while living down there in Florida, there was one day I get a phone call, and the person on the other line said, "Is this Henry Ross that used to be a waist gunner in a B-24?" I said, "Yes, I am." I recognized the voice right away. It happened to be one of my original crewmen. He was a gunner on the original crew, and he announced that he had rounded up other survivors. So there were about 4 other people that he had made contact with, and they were going to have a reunion in Dallas, Texas, with their wives, and then he wondered if I would be interested in joining them. And I said, of course I would. So we made a trip to Dallas sometime in the early 1990s, and we followed that up after that, getting together on 3 separate occasions, going to Branson, Missouri. Now, on that first reunion, one of the crewmen, he had contracted cancer, and all he could eat was baby food. And within a year, this fellow had died from his cancer. And the one that had been shot up as a tail gunner, he attended the reunion, and he also died about a year after that first meeting. So the group got smaller and smaller, and eventually the rest of them died. Right now, I'm the only survivor of the original 10-man crew. And let's see, that's... Can I pause here for a moment?
Well, I was going to ask you, Tell me a little bit about your family, your siblings.
Uh,
I think earlier you had told me you had, I think, 6 brothers.
well, yes. While I was in the service, I had 3 other brothers that were well. The one brother, he volunteered to join the service uh, right after the war started, and he was sent over to the Pacific on an island. I really don't know what kind of a job he had.
Mm-hmm.
We never talked much about what each one did. They all knew what I did, but uh, he was in the Air Force in the ground crew. I don't know exactly what he did. And I had another brother that was sent over to the Pacific, and I know he had an office job. That's all he was qualified for. And the other third brother, he was assigned to the Army in what they call the evacuation hospital. And he did serve over in Europe, but not on the front lines. I think he was behind the front lines where they were able to bring injured soldiers to this evacuation hospital, prepare them to fly them out of Europe over to England for further treatment. So he did serve in Europe, while all the fighting was going on, but he was never near the front lines. I was the only one subject to combat where I could be. Our plane could be damaged, and on one of my flights I skipped over. We were on our way to a target, and the pilot announced that he had to shut down one of the engines. He was having trouble with it, and we couldn't continue going to the target. And once he shut down that engine, we left the formation and headed back to our base. And as we were going back, he announced to the crew that he was having trouble with the second engine. Well, the B-24 was not known to be able to fly on 2 engines, so he ordered us to start throwing ammunition out and lighten the load. We had gotten rid of our bomb load right away, and while we're doing that, all of a sudden there was a loud bang in the back of the plane, and all of the tail gunner that we had, he spotted the enemy plane in the distance that had fired on us. I don't know what size ammunition he hit the plane with, but it didn't do any damage, and we stopped what we were doing, and those that could spot the plane, they started firing, and somehow we were able to lose that fighter plane. But anyway, we still had this possibility of shutting down on the second engine, and the pilot warned us. He says, "Well, we still have maybe an hour and a half to go before getting back to base." And on our way back, we had a body of water to go over between Italy and the country of Yugoslavia. There's what they call the Adriatic Sea that we had to cross on most of our missions, and he was afraid that if we were on 2 engines and they had to ditch the plane in the water, that was a no-no. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, he did have to shut down that second engine, but we were at a high enough altitude, maybe 10 or 12,000 feet, and with those 2 engines, and he began to lower the altitude at the same time, which allowed him to keep the airspeed up enough that we were able to get safely back to our base. Anyway, once we landed as I was back in my barracks, changing clothes and that, one of my crewmen said, "Well, Hank, you have blood on your shoulder." It was a very small amount of blood, but they advised me to go see the medics. Well, I did. And when I got there, they probed around with some instrument, and they couldn't find anything. But sure enough, my skin had been opened up, and it was bleeding a small amount. And I thought nothing about it. They just put a bandage on, and they said, "Oh, I was good to go. I could continue flying without interruption." And I know I flew the next 2 days, but about 3 weeks after that, they said, "Well, you have to go to the main hangar. They are going to award you with a Purple Heart." I couldn't believe that the injury would warrant something like that, but I do have the Purple Heart for that little wound in my shoulder. It doesn't bother me, but it's just a nice thing to have.
So you said you want to talk a little bit of a pause me? You want to take a break?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say,
you keep going. Whatever you want to do.
And shortly after the year 2000, it was in the year 2000. After our last foreign trip, we had just gotten back from Europe, and my son came to see us in late September. And lo and behold, in November, my wife and I were sitting alone in our house. We got a phone call. My son had passed out. He was at home, and the paramedics were attending to him, and he was unconscious. And about a half hour later, they called back and told us that he had passed away. He was only 45 years old, and that just knocked out my wife and I for a loop. We just couldn't understand because we had seen him, just a few months before that. But nevertheless, and he was living alone in Alexandria, Virginia, and he didn't have a will or that, but we had to go up, make funeral arrangements, and we didn't know any of the people where he lived, nothing. So that was a traumatic experience. He died in early November of the year 2000, and we had to sell the house. We finally sold it. They got a nice price for it. It increased in value by over $100,000. He paid about $350,000, and we sold it for about $450,000. But anyway, we practically lived up there for about 4 months. The new buyer couldn't take possession until he made the offer right in early January, but he was not able to close the deal until late March. And anyway, when we returned to Florida, we just decided to continue living there because my oldest brother was still alive. Yeah, he was in his late 90s, approaching 100, and he had lost his first wife and remarried and had lived about 20 years with his second wife, and she finally died about a year before he turned 100. He was living alone, and my wife and I, it was, in 2009, my wife and I, we were on the phone talking to our daughter in Indiana. Her husband had gotten out of the service, and they had relocated back to the Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we were accustomed to talking to him my daughter every Sunday morning. And this one Sunday morning in the month of March of the year 2009, we were on the phone, and after about a half hour, my wife was telling her she wasn't feeling good for the day or two before. And all of a sudden, she threw up her hand and she passed out. And I had to call 911, and they came and took her to the hospital. And she had suffered a stroke. Her carotid arteries were blocked, and she was in the hospital from late March till April 1st, and they couldn't do anything for her. They had me put her in a nursing home, and she was in the nursing home from April 1st till the 17th of April and passed away on that day. So she was gone in less than a month after that attack. And then after that, the 2009, I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to stay there because my oldest brother was still alive, and he would appreciate we got together quite often on weekends to watch football games and so on. And anyway, he did reach 100, and he was able to, he was in good enough health to arrange his own birthday party. But then he only lived 9 months after, a little short of 9 months after his 100th birthday. He died in the year 2012. So here I was all alone at that time. And in the year 2012, I needed to get new eyeglasses. My driver's license was about to expire, and I knew they give you a short eye exam to renew your license. And when I went to get new glasses, they announced that I had cataracts that needed to be taken care of. And well, I was all alone, and I didn't know what to do, so I needed help. And then I called on my sister-in-law, Carol Starwald, and she didn't want to come down to help me, but her daughter, Debbie, told her, she said, he's family. You have to go down and help him. Well, she did make up her mind. She came down, stayed with me about 3 weeks because you have to have a lot of eye drops put in for that procedure, and I didn't think I could handle it on my own. So while she was there, she noticed that there were no other neighbors that came to visit me and that, and she said, Hank, why don't you sell your place here in Florida and come back to Rochester? And I said, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was at an age where I couldn't stay there very long, living alone. But anyway, she invited me to come back up to Rochester to spend a Memorial weekend up here. The family got together at a camp over a Memorial weekend, and she also wanted me to come up for 4th of July. Her granddaughter put on a big picnic with fireworks on the 4th of July. I came up on both occasions, and then in Labor Day, there was nothing going on, and I didn't want to spend Florida down there alone. Mm-hmm. I called this Carol, my sister-in-law, asked her if I could come up over Labor Day, and she said, why, sure. So I did. I spent about 10 days up there. While I was up here, we visited her daughter, Debbie, and her husband. And when we came to see him, we noticed that he was rebuilding a house right next door to him. And he took me in and showed me the interior of the house. And he just said, well, when it's finished, well, we intend to sell it, of course. And the reason they bought the property, they wanted to control who would live there. And I said, well, what price are you asking? And they told me. And I said, would you mind if I became your neighbor? I would like to buy the place. I guess they couldn't believe me. Anyway, they did accept. I said, well, yes, we'd love to have you as our neighbor. So we didn't even shake on the deal. I said, okay, I'm going to buy it. And the next question was, when would it be finished? He still had a lot of work to do on it. And here it was, early September. And he said, well, it won't be finished till next May, around the Memorial Weekend. And I thought, well, my gosh, why so long? Well, he had a business he was engaged with. He had to take care of that, and he was the busiest during the winter months, and he could only work on the house. He was doing all the work himself, and it would take all winter and spring to get the house ready to move into. So yeah, I wanted to spend another winter in Florida, so that didn't bother me. And anyway, eventually I sold my house, made the sale in April of 2013, getting it ready. And the closing date would be just before Memorial Weekend. And anyway, in early 2013, the sister-in-law of mine, Carol, she got to thinking. She owned a house over in the town of Greece. And she says, well, here I am. I'm going to move in right next to her daughter. And there's no reason for her to be living about 20 minutes away. So she put her house up for sale. And she automatically just figured that it was okay if she moved in with me. Well, I hadn't given it that much thought, but I was happy that she made that decision.
Sure.
She put her house up for sale, and she knew it would be okay. She thought it would be okay for me to share the house with her, and that's the way it ended up. Now, when I moved up here, the house was not finished by the end of May, and I had to live with Carol at her other place for a couple months. We eventually did move in August of 2013. And this house had 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, so it was a nice arrangement. We got along very, very well together, and we stayed together until the year 2022, when all of a sudden, one day she had been to the doctor, came home, and she got ill and that, and kind of said she needed Debbie to look after her. And Debbie had been with her at the doctor's office, came home, and she seemed to be okay, but she she thought she was going to pass out. Well, she laid down the floor in the hallway, and Debbie came over and tried to make her comfortable. And anyway, eventually Debbie said, "Oh, I got to take you to the hospital." Well, she did. And they did some testing on her, and the next day they said she had cancer, and she was at a stage where it would take her life in just a matter of a couple of weeks. And that's what happened. She died in March on the 27th, about 2 days from now. No, I'm sorry, it would be tomorrow.
Mhm.
It would be 3 years that she had passed away. So I've been, after she was left and that, the funeral and that, I was faced with living in this house all alone. But right away, Debbie and Gary, my niece and her husband, they automatically came over and started taking care of me. And they became my primary caretakers. And I have to say that without their help, I wouldn't be here today. They've been so marvelous and outgoing and accommodating, taking care of me. I had stopped driving my car, so Debbie had to take me to all my doctor appointments. And now she does most of my shopping. She does all my house cleaning and that. I'm able to take care of myself. I can shower by myself and use the toilet on my own. I can make my own breakfast and lunch. And about 50% of the time, Debbie will bring over a hot dinner for me at night. Otherwise, I have frozen entrees I heat up. And here I am today, only less than 2 months away from turning 101. And to back up, a year ago, when I reached 100, why Debbie arranged a large party for me. She had about 100 names to invite, but there were about 60 people that showed up at this party. It was right on my birthday, and the grand affair. And she went all out, bought a lot of food for it, and then I had 2 parties on my birthday. 2 days later, I had relatives that they didn't want to attend the first party, so they arranged a second party for me 2 days later on a Saturday that was only open to relatives on my side of the family. And I think there were about 30 people that showed up for that party. And right now, I'm just taking one day at a time. I have a lot of health problems. Back last November, I had surgery. I had skin cancer on my head, near my hairline, forehead, and that hasn't fully healed as yet. And I have to rely on a walker to get around with. I cannot stand alone very long. But nevertheless, other than that, I have a pacemaker, and according to the VA, I'm 70% disabled, so I get all my medication at no charge from the VA, and plus a lot of other help as well. And here I am, waiting to reach that 101 mark on May 16th of this year.
It's amazing.
I think that covers everything up to the present time, right?
I think it surely did. And you did such a beautiful job explaining all that's in your life and all the people that you've touched and all the people that are still around. And we can't wait for that 101 birthday party. There are probably some other things I'd like to ask you, but I think you've done such a beautiful job today again. We could probably take a break now and let you relax.
Yeah.
This guy does some amazing puzzles around here. Boy, we're going to take some pictures sometime. Let the people see what you do during the day.
Yeah.
But
Well, I should say my pastime is working on puzzles. And the other thing I do like is to play euchre, the game of euchre.
tomorrow is his day. You play here, or does you take
No,
him out?
I have twin nieces.
Mm-hmm.
The one is a widow, the other's married. And the three of them, they come maybe about once a month, and we spend a whole afternoon playing euchre right here, about 5 games. And whenever Debbie's family gets together at the Memorial Weekend and the different holidays,
She said
we
Christmas.
usually manage to squeeze in a couple games of euchre. Tomorrow I'm going to play euchre with a couple of fellas. The one fella I have met, I only know him briefly, but he's bringing a friend, and Gary and these other 2 fellas are coming.
Nice.
We're playing euchre here.
Okay.
It'll be the first.
Do you play for bragging rights, or you to put some money on it?
I'm not sure. Well, we'll see.
Keeps your mind sharp, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Well,
No, I'm able to take care of all my bills. You know, I don't rely on Debbie to help me that way.
Tell me a little bit about your granddaughter.
Well, she right now she's about 30, almost 34 years old, I think. Yeah, she went to college. I don't see much of her because when she was born, they lived in Indiana, and at the time we were living down in Florida. I actually lived in Florida from 1980 to 2013.
Long time.
A total of 33 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in the service, I had basic training at Miami Beach. Well, and that was in the wintertime. That was all right. But in August, I was in Panama City doing a gunnery training there, the hottest time of the year. And I said to myself, I never want to live in Florida.
Why, is it too hot?
And the only reason I ended up there is because this company I would work for transferred me to Florida. I had to go. I hadn't worked long enough to be eligible for a pension.
Right.
So I had to accept the transfer, and in order to get enough years in to earn a pension. And then I wound up staying there for 33 years. We lived there year-round. Of course, on vacation and that, we'd try to come back to this area. And
well, I know Debbie and Gary are glad you came back here, and I know a lot of people are glad you came back here.
It's totally unexpected the way it's turned out when they agreed to let me buy the house.
Right.
On
a handshake, you said?
Yeah.
Just a verbal.
And to think that her mother just automatically assumed that it was okay to move in with me. No, she wouldn't have it any other way. But she had a car. I didn't interfere. You know, she could live the way she wanted to. But we just managed to get along. Good. The one thing I wasn't aware of, she had a close relation with all her great-grandchildren, and she had 9 altogether. And when I came up here, they had birthday parties for every one of them, and she had to attend. And of course, I had to go with her. So here I was shelling out money for birthday presents that I hadn't counted on. And it wasn't only birthdays, but it's the same thing at Christmas.
Right.
She had to buy gifts for all of them, and I had to contribute at Christmas
Right.
as well. So, no, I've been accepted as really a member of their family, and yeah,
Well, I
like
can
I
see
said,
why.
yeah.
I can see why. Can I come back again? We could talk some more about history too.
About what?
About history, like I'd love to ask you some questions. What it was
No,
like
sure.
going up through Korean War, Vietnam War, certain moments in history. Can I come back sometime for that?
Well, I don't have much. While I was in
You don't
Florida
have to.
in the year 2012, I was able to go on an honor flight
Uh huh.
out of Florida. Down there, they did it all in one day. You assembled early in the morning around 5 o'clock at the airport. They chartered a plane to take you up to Baltimore, and they serve. There's a McDonald's restaurant. They put on a spread for breakfast,
Yeah.
and you sit around in the airport for about an hour eating breakfast. And they had about three girls come in singing World War II
No
songs
kidding.
while we're eating breakfast. And then when that's all over, well, then they start loading the plane, and a lot of the vets that were in wheelchairs, so it took a while, to get the wheelchairs on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
We flew up to Baltimore, and when we landed at Baltimore, there was a crowd of people welcoming us as we got off the plane. And then we had to board buses to drive to Washington. We spent the whole day, going around to the different monuments.
Mm-hmm.
And late in the day, when we returned by bus to the Baltimore airport, and we arrived back in Florida close to 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And when we got back there was a crowd of people waiting to shake our hand and welcome us back. And we couldn't. I was anxious to get to my car and to go home, but that was not to be.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guardian on that trip, and he was a veteran of the Vietnam War, and he had to pay $400 to make that trip.
No kidding.
And his wife was with him, and she was a guardian for a Navy
Mhm.
fella. She had to pay too, and they said they would do it again.
That's great.
Yeah, very nice couple. In fact, I have a book over here that they took photographs, and
Mm-hmm.
the woman said, "I don't need to take my I have my camera," but she said, "You don't have to take pictures. I will, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll make up a book and send it to you," which they didn't charge me. Very nice couple.
What about your graduation from
Oh,
tell us about that.
I skipped over that part. Yeah. In the year 2017, I was down at they own a camp about 100 miles south of here with a log cabin, over 100 acres of ground. And every Memorial Day, they invite relatives and friends. There's maybe about 40 people show up for the weekend,
Mhm.
starting late Friday night right through Monday. Anyway, I was down there on this weekend in 2017, and on the Sunday, I think it was, there was a couple came down. They had a son down there as a guest, and they wanted to just come down and see the son. And they brought along a neighbor of theirs. And this neighbor, his wife was working, and he had nothing to do. And for some reason, they invited him to come down. Well, he did. He didn't know anybody, as far as I know. Anyway, when it came dinner time, we all sat around the table and filled our plates and that. And he happened to sit right next to me. And because of my age and that, he inquired, was I in one of the wars? And I told him, I was a veteran of World War II. And I told him all about that experience. I told them I had to quit high school after my junior year to take a job to help support the family and that. And that was it. That was about this is getting, supper time and that. And anyway, I turned in at to go to bed about 9 o'clock, and he was still there. But this couple, they were getting ready to drive back to Rochester. And I thought nothing more about it. Well, a couple of weeks after that, it was around maybe the 15th of June. I get one of my Debbie's granddaughter, or daughter, I should say, notify me. She said, "Uncle Hank, you have to go to East High. They want to present you with something, um, a diploma." I couldn't believe it. I said, "Yeah." They said this fellow that I met down at the camp, he got hold of the principal of East High School and told this principal about the fact that I quit at that time. But here I was, no high school diploma, but I had an associate degree from RIT. Anyway, this principal agreed that they would present me with, it's really what they call an honorary diploma.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to take any lessons or that to earn it, So it's just a fictitious high school diploma. But it was quite an interest I had to attend. The thing is that they said, well, you show up at 9 o'clock, and the graduation of the seniors was to start at 10 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when the whole program would begin. Well, between 9 and 10 o'clock, they took me to a hallway, and when I got there was every TV channel locally waiting there for me, and they had their cameras on me. They were bombarding me with all kinds of questions. And the fella, it was this fella that I met that I made the arrangement, but he wasn't able to attend that ceremony. He had a woman that he worked at the Democrat Chronicle, and he had a girl from the newspaper show up, and she presented me with a gown.
No kidding.
With the East High colors and a cap.
Nice.
I still have it. And for an hour, I had to answer all these people. I think right here, there's a photograph. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very handsome. You're eating some food there, too. And then this looks like,
Let's see.
I think that's Sean Nelms, right? I
Oh.
think he's the superintendent of the district, right?
This was, he's got a high paying
He
job.
sure does,
with
yeah.
The schools.
Yeah, he's
Nelms?
Sean, yep.
Yeah.
Sean Nelms, and I think he's the
There you go.
superintendent of the school district.
And anyway, after the ceremony, I didn't stay after that. I left before. They said I could leave
Mhm.
before they gave diplomas to the
Right.
students.
Be a long time to sit
Yeah.
through that.
So I did leave, and then her daughter put on a luncheon at her house down by the lake.
Mhm.
Invited my relatives to attend. There wasn't room enough for them at the auditorium,
Yeah.
at the high school, to accommodate too many people. But
Got a big roar from cheering from the kids and everything.
Yeah. Now, in 2 years ago, 2023.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's Debbie's sister knew a fella that was a member of the American Legion. That's this fella here. His
Right
name
here?
is Mike.
Mike Conway. Oh,
Yeah.
Mike Conway.
Mike Conway is his name.
He's a member of the American Legion post in Greece on
Okay.
Dorsey Road there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once a year they have a fundraising drive in the month of August, and at that fundraising drive they try to honor a veteran of any war.
Mm-hmm.
Now they had not honored anybody from World War II. So
No kidding.
when Mike found out I was in World War II, he came and asked me if I would be willing to appear. Well, I did agree, and I had to show up at their post at 7 a.m. on Dorsey Road there, and we hung around for a while. Then we drove over to Trimmer Road, the American Legion
Mhm.
post, for snacks, coffee, and then they had a brief ceremony outside, and then they formed a motorcade. And
Okay.
we went from Trimmer Road back to Dorsey Road.
Sweet.
All the roads were blocked. They had security to block traffic. And when we got to Mount Reed Boulevard, there were 2 fire trucks there with a
With a
flag.
Big flag, yeah.
And we got, to the grounds of the American Legion post. And after about a half hour, when then there was one fella in charge. He started speaking. They had a prepared program to offer, and he talked about a lot of other people, and eventually got around to
Mm-hmm.
introducing me
Mhm.
to the crowd. And when he finished, I had to speak to everybody for maybe about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was from 7 a.m. to 4 o'clock. I
Mhm.
was tied up. After that ceremony, where I was available, where people would just come up and congratulate
Sure.
me for my service. And that's what
This luncheon.
some of these people are. I started getting gifts that I didn't expect.
Right.
That blanket there was one. Somebody gave me this with the Purple Heart.
Like a Purple Heart type of pen and
It's the shape of a bullet. Actually, it's got my name on the case, and they got from a complete stranger.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Now this fella right here, he gave me this cup. It was made by his neighbor who does that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what he paid for it, but he gave it to me as a gift, that mic. So
Very, very
that's
nice.
quite a ceremony.
Well, can I ask you, we're doing this podcast so a lot of your family members can see it. What's
One
some-
more thing?
keep talking, yeah.
Last summer, about the month of July,
Mhm.
this fellow is the state senator, Robert Orr.
Mm-hmm.
He represents this area here. And each year they select a number of veterans, and you have to be a member, be serving in one of the wars. You have to have a good record. I don't know what the other criteria is, but my one niece knew about this, and she
Mhm.
fed him a lot of information. And after reading or getting
Yeah.
this information, he said, "Well, I qualify to be inducted in what they call the New York State Senate Veterans Hall of Fame." I didn't know anything about it, but he came to the house last July. I was supposed to go to Albany and have it presented to me, but and it's too far for me to travel. And so he came, made the presentation. He brought that big one, the enlarged one. It's here. It's the same information.
Yep.
Yeah. So I had 3 honors here that
Wow.
I never expected.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, so this says Henry Ross was selected as a 2024 Veterans Hall of Fame inducted by Senator Robert G. Hort. Very nice picture of you too there.
Yeah.
With all, yeah, like you said, all your service and all
Yeah.
your information here. Very impressive life.
No.
And you got more to it coming.
Well,
You're going to live a lot longer, I think, the way your
Yeah.
attitude is.
no, they're very, very nice fellow. He was here about an hour. He had another fellow with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he lives, I forget what town.
Grand Island?
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, you got
No,
the.
I knew nothing about why they do this. That's beyond me. But
Well, I think something that I've learned, and I'm obviously a lot younger, is that a lot of the World War II veterans, that they're extremely humble people, and they don't expect anything in return. And so, like, I can hear in your voice, like, I didn't deserve the Purple Heart. You said that before. This was a surprise to me, getting my honorary diploma, and it's so heartwarming to hear from people like yourself.
I had no idea, that the VA had benefits to hand out. Had I stayed in Florida, I wouldn't have known anything about the help the VA would give out.
Mm-hmm.
When I came up, Carol was saw a lot of a cousin of my wife. It's a first cousin. His name is John Goodyear. And he was the first cousin to my wife. He's not a relative of mine, but he and his wife always took care. Carol was living alone, just a few blocks away from where they lived. And on Friday night, they would occasionally take her out to dinner with them. And then when I moved up here, why she introduced me to him. And ever since then, this John Goodyear and his wife, well, mainly John, he stays in constant touch with me. Quite often, he and his brother and another woman that Carol knew, she's about 90 years old, the 3 of them, they'll come and bring a pizza and have lunch with me.
Nice.
Oh, maybe on the average of 4 or 5 weeks in between. And it's just a nice, time. They spend a couple of hours just chewing the fat and that. If I have a puzzle on this woman, she'll work on the puzzle. She'll stay longer, but no, I've met so many nice people since I've been up here. Like I said, had I stayed in Florida, I wouldn't have known anything about these benefits. Because when I was talking with John, I told him, I'm a veteran in World War II, and I told him I had the Purple Heart, and he introduced me to a fellow that works for New York State, and his job was to help veterans apply for disability. And he took me to this fellow's office on South Avenue. And as a result, this fellow, he wrote up 3 separate applications for disability. One was for my shoulder scrap and my loss of hearing and what they call post-traumatic stress. And I had 3 appointments I had to go to. The hearing was down in Warsaw. The shrapnel one was a walk-in health place in Chile. And I had to go to a place along Lake Ontario, almost to Fort Niagara. I forget. Anyway, The one that was approved was the one for ESP.
Oh,
And the others were I was turned down on. Well, this fella apparently he couldn't figure out why I was turned down on the loss of hearing because I had had a test with the VA and they said, yeah, I had a loss of hearing. And that's when they gave me some hearing aid. And they figured, well, my gosh, he's wearing a hearing aid. He's also, he should be entitled to some compensation.
Mhm.
So on his own, he reapplied. And sure enough, they changed their mind and they increased the disability. They did nothing about the shoulder, but he said, well, I'm going to reapply. And he did. And they sent me to a different place to be tested for that. Well, as a result, I wasn't quite as nimble
mhm.
as the first time. And then the results was that they did award me extra disability. Once you reach over 50%, then you get all your medication at no charge.
Okay.
And that's one big benefit. It allowed me to stop paying insurance to a private insurance company. And here I get all my medication at no charge. I just get on the phone and order what the doctors have me on, and within 2 weeks, it comes in the mail. Usually, it only takes a week,
Mhm.
but right now I'm up. I had another retest on the hearing, and as a result, they did increase it 10%.
Mhm.
So I went from 60 up to 70%. And I had one test, they said, yes, you have more hearing loss, but for some reason they didn't increase it.
Mhm.
I'm willing to bet if I went and had one more test, depending on the result, then they might give me another 10%.
Mhm.
But at 100%, boy, they really send a large amount of money.
Mhm.
I know I met a vet that lived over in Scottsville. He was 100%.
Mhm.
And at that time, he was getting a check well over $3,000 a month.
Okay.
And his wife got a check to take care of him as well. I don't know how much,
Mhm.
but if I were married, my spouse would get a check.
Well, they should take care of you, you know? Now, what's your secret to staying so sharp?
So, I don't know.
You don't know, or
No,
you want to keep it a secret?
I don't know.
Good neighbors, doing the puzzle, playing euchre.
Puzzles, euchre, and doing numbers.
It's helpful.
You like
being
numbers
around
too,
young
Hank?
People, I
Thanks
think.
much.
Down there in Florida, I was only acquainted with elderly people. You
Mhm.
know, there were no children involved.
Mhm.
I had a niece down there. I had two nephews down there, and my youngest brother and his wife. They moved down there, but he died well before I left Florida, and his wife died before I came up here. So I was never around children in the 33 years I lived down there.
Mhm.
But up here, exposed to them all the time.
They keep you
Yeah.
young at heart.
Proof right there. Look
Oh
at
yeah.
They just came over one Sunday night, and they sat here. I was over there. They surrounded me. She took a picture, and
Right. That came out great.
yeah,
It's all his family,
Mhm.
both sides.
Beautiful.
I couldn't ask for a better situation than I'm at right
Mhm.
now. These are some of the happiest times of my life.
Tell me a little bit about those medals that are in that frame.
Well,
If you can turn around. I don't mean to make you joggle too much.
The only one that really matters to me was
Purple Heart.
after you fly so many flights, I forget, maybe the first 10 flights, they award you a bent medal like that.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, the more flights you put in, and then they give you a little star. I don't know. I thought there would be stars on there, but this red one here, that's what they call a good conduct medal, meaning I was okay throughout the entire time I was in the service. You know, I didn't screw up or that. And this one, I think it's just a show that I was served over in Europe
Okay.
at that time. Oh, I was only over there, from April 1944 till about late September.
Right.
The other medals, I'm not too sure what they're all about. A niece of mine discovered that I was eligible for other medals, and she got in touch with Louise Slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's dead now, right? But she was in Congress, and she contacted her, and they looked up my record, and I was eligible for those awards. And so she's the one that took the measure to see that the Louise Slaughter could get me those medals. But
Do you have any? Go ahead. Do you have anything on your bucket list? Anything that you want to do?
not really.
Not really.
No, just stay as healthy as I can. I mean, the alternative, if it ever reaches a point where I can't take a shower and have trouble, Debbie and Gary, it's all agreed that I would have to leave here, and I'm eligible to go to the nursing home that the VA runs in Batavia. And because of my Purple Heart, Debbie and I made a visit there last fall just to look it over, and it's a very nice facility. I asked what it would cost me, and they said, well, because of the Purple Heart and my disability, the cost would be zero.
Oh, that's
So
great.
that's a big relief in itself. And if I ever had to go there, I'm sure I wouldn't last very long. Not seeing visitors.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, Debbie is over sometimes a half a dozen times a day more. I think she lives over here more than she does at her own house at time. And Gary's, he showed up last night.
Yeah.
About 10 o'clock. The door was locked. He has a key. He opened the door, came in. I was sitting here working on the puzzle, and they're looking after me all the time. I just can't understand it. I used to be able to cut my own lawn up till the last year. I started in the spring, but I have a riding mower, but after about a month, it was too much. And Gary, he got a zero turn mower. He could go do both lawns in less time. So he has that problem of taking care of both yards. And of course, he plows my driveway in the wintertime. And all I have to do is get up, get dressed, enjoy the day, and that's about it.
It's a good life.
No,
You owed it. You deserved it.
I look forward, to having people drop in to see me. It gets lonely at times, but considering everything, I'm the luckiest people alive right now. I had no idea I would last this long with all my trouble. I have a stent also in my heart that was put in when I lived in Florida. The pacemaker was, that's been in, maybe about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years. I didn't think they would put them in somebody that old. And they said, oh, yeah. But, no, last year I had a blood disease. I was in the hospital from the mid December all the way through January. I was in the hospital only about 6 days, but they had to treat me for the blood disease with IVs in my arm, and they moved me into the rehab facility. So all that time I had to take physical therapy and occupation therapy. And in between, they gave me IVs twice a day, 12 hours apart. And I was there over the Christmas, New Year, month and a half. And I survived. Like I said, I believe in God's looking after me my entire life. Like I said, in the beginning, I was hit by a car, and it could have been almost fatal if the car had run over me. But I was lucky enough to escape and only get knocked down. And then during that one training flight, it was a night flight. We had the nose wheel of the aircraft break off. We had an instructor pilot. And just about the time we were up to airspeed to lift off the ground, this plane started to shake and the pilot applied the brake, and the nose wheel broke off, and the nose of the plane scraped along the runway. Fortunately, it didn't catch on fire, but we were lucky to, crawl out of the plane with no trouble. And like I said, I didn't even know I was hit with that shrapnel. Somehow it got through my clothing and into my skin. I had no idea. I didn't feel a thing. Had somebody not seen the blood on my shoulder, I wouldn't even have gone to the medics.
Well, someone's looking over you.
That's the way I believe there is a God, and I read scripture lessons
Guardians too.
every day. Yeah.
Well, Henry, it's been great getting to know you over these 2 podcast sessions. You're a heck of a person.
Well,
I feel better knowing you.
it's great. Like I said, I'm at a happy time of my life, and I just hope it continues right up to the very end.
Me too.
And, I look forward to every day getting up. I don't think about, my final day. I don't know when that's going to arrive. I just figure out I'm in pretty good shape. I'm able to eat good meals and that. I don't have any problem that way. And as long as I can still get dressed on my own and take care of myself in most respects, why, that's all I ask for. I'm one very fortunate person, and being here with the 2 of them it's just been a fortunate experience for me.
Well, it's been fortunate for me too.
Okay, Mike. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Well, I'm going to keep coming around to just say hi, I think.
Okay.
Maybe I'll even pick up a euchre game with you once in a while.
Okay.
I don't know if I can play the way you can, though.
The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find